Well, to discuss the U.S. strategy in Syria and Turkey's Operation Olive Branch, I'm joined now from Ankara by former Turkish Armed Forces official Murat Aslan. He's now a security studies researcher at the SETA Foundation. From Rougemont in Switzerland is former U.S. Ambassador Peter Galbraith. And in Washington, D.C. is former Syrian diplomat Bassam Barabandi. He's also the co-founder of the Syrian civil society group People Demand Change. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Peter Galbraith, let me start with you. So we have Senator Graham come to Ankara, speak with President Erdogan. There seems to be a thaw, and perhaps Turkey and the United States might be almost on the same page with regards to northern Syria and the border. Is that a good thing?
Well, with this president and this administration, it's really impossible to know what they stand for at all. If what they've agreed is that the authorities in northeast Syria will continue to function and that there won't be a Turkish attack, then that's a good thing. If there's some agreement to have a Turkish attack, that's going to be bad for the people in northeast Syria. It's going to be bad for the United States and certainly for its reputation as a reliable ally. And it's going to be bad for Turkey because it's going to get bogged down in the place.
Murat Aslan, 1 year on since Operation Olive Branch was announced and had begun, was it worth it?
Well, we have to look for the ultimate aims of the operation, which was announced by the then ministers and also President Erdogan. We know that the first objective was to secure the borders, and the second one was to prevent the infiltration of terrorist cells, and third one was to establish a secure zone to have civilians go back to their land. And today we know that the borders are secured, there is no terrorist infiltration, and also civilians are going back, which means the ultimate objectives of the last year's operation has been achieved, and currently we are experiencing it by the current security situation, except several attacks of, terror cells, which is very rare.
Right. But I mean, when people see that there were 2 bombs on buses in Afrin, when they see there was a suicide bombing in Manbij, it tells them that things are clearly not right. Does that mean that maybe Turkey is putting an overly optimistic spin on things, whereas in actual fact things are not very good right now?
We have to, check the nature of terrorism actually, because we know that any terrorist activity may happen or occur at any time and at any place. And we have witnessed this for the last 1 week at the north of Syria. And it is natural that terror cells will commit attacks just to remind their presence and activities and have the other opposing forces or elements to be deterred. So we have witnessed such kind of attacks either in Afrin, and also currently we are witnessing it at the north of Syria, mostly at the east of Euphrates. But the attacks at the east of Euphrates are a bit suspicious, because I'm not sure if Daesh is really conducting such kind of attacks, because Daesh must be happy with the withdrawal of the United States.
Okay, and I mean, a lot of people would answer that, Daesh does what Daesh does regardless of the politics. Let me bring in Bassam Barabandi now. Bassam Barabandi, 1 year on since the beginning of Operation Olive Branch. Let me ask you the same question. Was it worth it?
Was it worth it? This is $1 million questions. Definitely from Turkish perspective, it's worth it. They clean enclave of center of PKK. Definitely is Turkey more safe as a Turkey from terrorist attack coming from PKK supporters. So from that perspective, definitely it's worth it and successful. It shows the army, Turkish army was a professional. It takes its time, not much distractions on the building infrastructure. So this part, I think 100% is correct and worth it. And Turkey did what it's supposed to do for its own national security. From Syrian perspective, what we saw, how Turkey dealt with that area, I don't think it was good model or successful model to follow on. It brought a lot of pro-Syrian militia, pro-Turkish Syrian militia, who were not on the same page of secular Turkey or the good Turkey that we hope to see in Syria. They didn't deal with the people in the right way, in good shape. There's a huge displacement of the civilian Kurds who I think they pay the price, they have nothing to do with it. It creates more tension between the Kurds and Turkey, which allow PKK supporters to say, Turkey is coming to kill us, no matter if you are civilian, if you have something to do with PKK or not. So, this kind of dynamics within Syria,
right.
I don't think in favor of Turkey. So if we take that model to say Turkey will go to the northeast of Syria with that model, I think it will be a very dangerous model.
Okay, Peter Galbraith, President Erdogan has said Turkey is ready to take over Manbij security as well, along with the FSA and other allies. Would you be open to that, or do you prefer the SDF to control it?
Well, let me first address the question that you posed to the others about the operation in Afrin.
Go ahead.
You had 167,000 people displaced, according to the United Nations, between 400 and 500 civilians killed. You had some war crimes. And this was from a place that was the most peaceful part of Syria. It's a lovely territory. There's no evidence that there were terrorist attacks coming from Afrin onto Turkey. And instead, it's been ethnically cleansed, a significant destruction and loss of life. You've also had replacement of the Kurdish population by people from other parts of Syria, including Eastern Ghouta. These agreements, and it is now plenty of those so-called pro-Turkish militias there are in fact extremists with links to Al-Qaeda.
Okay, and so clearly you're not a fan of it, right? But just to address one of the points, so we had Senator Lindsey Graham state very categorically and clearly on Saturday, saying the evidence is clear that the YPG is connected to the PKK, right? And you say there's no evidence that this would have been used as a launching pad for any attacks. In 2006, in February, in March, in April, 2 attacks in Ankara, 1 attack in Bursa. Clearly, these TAK, or the urban wing of the PKK members, were trained by the YPG in Syria. They put it on their website. They were proud of them. So this is part of the frustration from the Turkish perspective when they hear American officials say, well, there's no evidence that the two are linked, when it's as clear as daylight here. Everything that you might have said might be absolutely true, but the link between the PKK and YPG, is it still a question mark for you, Ambassador Galbraith?
Well, are there people in the YPG who've been in the PKK? Are there some connections? Obviously, anybody who goes there also will notice there are a certain number of pictures around of Öcalan.
Right.
But is it the PKK? No, I don't think so. And also, there's a broader problem, perhaps beyond the scope of this show. But how is Turkey going to deal with the PKK? You know, it's a strategy that it's followed since 1984. Hasn't exactly worked. This thing's been going on for 35 years. It might make sense to do what Erdogan was doing, which is to negotiate, to find a settlement with them within the borders of Turkey that gave Kurdish rights and that sort of thing, maybe some amnesty. You know, Britain, in the end, had to negotiate with the IRA, which it also considered to be a terrorist organization, which committed numerous acts of terrorism.
And that's interesting.
And you had a result.
Okay, and that's an interesting point, but there's also splits within the PKK, because there were those who were willing to negotiate around 2011 and 2012, and those who were not in Kandil, right? But that's almost a separate rabbit hole that we don't want to go down. Murat Aslan...
They're split in Turkey.
Certainly.
Turkey is
okay, fair enough.
About this, but there are many elements in Syrian Kurdish areas that are not PKK, and many of the people in northeast Syria are not even Kurds. I mean, they're Christians, they're Arabs. So it's a different place, and it's operating differently.
And that's what Bassam is bringing up. He's saying, yes, there's a lot of major questions that have been raised over the past year. Let me bring in Murat. Murat, respond directly to Ambassador Galbraith.
Well, you can't equate Kurds with PKK. Currently, there are more than 60,000 Kurds being armed to protect their villages against PKK. This is the first issue. And the second thing is that PKK has been found to claim not a Kurdish state, but a Marxist-Leninist Kurdish state, which is ideologically motivated to convert all the southeast of Turkey to a region where an ideology persists. And finally, I want to give some, numbers. We know that 1.5 or 2 million people, Kurdish people, has been living at the northeast of Syria, and almost 50% of these people has immigrated either to Syria or Turkey. And we estimate that more than 500,000 Kurds are currently in Turkey as Syrian refugee.
Okay.
And we know that on December 9th of 2018, Ambassador James Jeffrey has consulted with the leader of these Kurds and tried to urge them to immigrate back. But they refused. Why? Because they claimed that PKK has suppressed them, forced them to immigrate, and 4 leaders of the Kurdish groups at the northeast of Syria were killed by PKK.
Understood. Okay.
Which means you can't equate PKK with the Kurds.
Okay. Ambassador Galbraith, we're going to swap you out for another guest in a moment, but I want you to have your chance to respond to Murat. And folded into that response, I want to ask you the basic question. Trump is leaving. He's announced the US is leaving. Now, it might happen a little bit slower than he initially envisaged. Is it the right or wrong thing to do?
Well, it's the wrong thing to abandon an ally that fought with the United States, regardless of what Turkey thinks of them. They took more than 8,000 casualties fighting in areas that are not Kurdish, like Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor. And up until this week, the U.S. had 2 casualties. Now, the United States has had 6 casualties. As to the character of the area, I think that I would hope that Turkey's analysis would be a little bit more up to date. Marxist-Leninism's something of the past. Actually, what's been put into northeast Syria is the philosophy of Murray Bookchin, who's a philosopher from my own state of Vermont. It's a kind of interesting gender equality, totally secular, without favoring one ethnic group over the other. And a lot of that's been successful. I don't see that as being actually particularly dangerous. And indeed, a lot of it goes to the ideals that Ataturk himself put into place for example, emancipation of women and getting away from ethnic identities. So, I think a peace process, and many of the people in northeast Syria don't have links to the PKK. What he says is true, is there are people outside who don't like the conscription into the YPG. That is a problem that needs to be solved. It's not a perfect place there by any means, but it's just more complex than to say this is simply PKK. The YPG, the PYD are really quite different, even if there are elements in there that have connections to the PKK.
Ambassador Peter Galbraith, it's always good to get your perspective on the newsmakers. I thank you for joining us. We're going to say goodbye to Peter Galbraith and bring in Kevork Almassian. He's the founder of the alternative Syrian news website, Syriana Analysis. Kevork, it's interesting. We look at the big picture, and Lindsey Graham on the weekend used this phrase. He said, if we don't sort this out or we don't fix this, especially with regards to the disagreement between the United States and Turkey over what to do with the border and the very nature of the PYD and the YPG and so on, he said Syria is going to become Iraq on steroids, assuming he meant Daesh is going to be resurgent and so on. Do you agree with that?
Actually, I don't agree the fact that ISIS will re-emerge and re-spread the way it was in 2014 and 2015. However, if we listen to Lindsey Graham's statement carefully, he means that Turkey is too important to lose. Since this failed coup d'etat in Turkey, there was this rift between the United States and Turkey, and there were different policies underground regarding Syria between Ankara and Washington. So one of these policies was to support the so-called SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, who are the YPG, in order to destroy this Frankenstein that was created thanks to the regional powers who supported the Islamists in Syria. But this YPG, this SDF, their power has grown into extent that they now pose a national security threat for Turkey. So if we look if we put this into proper context, we understand from a Turkish perspective that this Kurdish threat should be destroyed from the borders. However, if we look from a Syrian perspective, we will realize that two wrongs doesn't make it right? Because supporting the YPG was wrong in Syria, but at the same time, penetrating the Syrian soil by the Turkish forces is also not right, because Turkey is not only liberating these areas from the YPG, but also there's a huge displacement of people and also occupation of territories underground. Turkey is imposing its laws and regulations on these territories and also injecting Turkish values through education, through other infrastructure. Okay. So there is more than destroying YPG, but okay, the Turkish policy nowadays is to create a zone in North Syria. It's called safe zones by Turkey, but practically it's an area that would remain loyal to Turkey, whether through direct means or through indirect means. That means through either force or through values, ideology, and imposing culture over the people. Okay, so Bassam, I promise I'm not ignoring you. I'm going to come to you in a moment, but I need to get Murat's response to that. Murat, is that what a safe zone means? Because Kevork has a very cynical view of what the safe zone means to him.
Well, what Turkey is committed, first of all, is not to fight against Kurds. Okay, there's a threat very close to the borders of Turkey, but it's not a Kurdish threat. It is a terrorist threat. It is a threat emanating from PKK. Because 20% of this country is made up of Kurds. So we can't claim that Turkey is against Kurds. And the second issue, Turkey has been struggling for 4 decades against PKK and clearly aligned all the laws in Turkey to fight against terrorism in accordance with international law. And in Syria case, we have witnessed that Turkey was consistent with international law for such a type of conflict, which means Turkish line is consistent and committed to defect terror cells, not a certain type of people or Kurds or anybody else. So this is actually a clear portraying of the picture for the Syria case, not only for Turkish case.
Bassam Barabandi, if Turkey and the United States cannot come to an agreement, there is a suggestion, and there have been many reports that the YPG has been reaching out to Assad, been reaching out to the Russians. If the YPG turns in that direction with the Russians, Assad, the Iranians, what will happen?
No, I have few comments I have to say. Go ahead. Number one, most of the Americans, they believe in PKK, or they believe in the Kurdish case, and they see the PKK, PYD is the face of that case, which is totally wrong, totally disaster. When they mentioned that the PKK, PYD, they lost 8,000 soldiers liberating areas in Syria against ISIS, which is true, but they forget that out of 8,000 killed, most of them, they are Arab fighters. They are not Kurdish fighters. More than 60% of them, they are Arabs. So they don't mention this just to say the Kurdish sacrifice. The Kurdish didn't sacrifice anything. The Arab in that area sacrificed against ISIS. And PKK, PYD, they are one unit. They are one unit, 100%. All the senior American officials, when they make testimony at the hearing at the Senate and the House, they make it very clear and open. So this is not secret, it's not my position. It's very much American position. They don't want to see the right things. This is why we are here, from Maghr till today. The Turkish-American problems is not because it started from Obama times. It's not 2 years ago. It started from 2003, 12 or 13, when President Erdogan was, or the US or Turkish government were asking to have no-fly zone in Syria, and the Americans said no till today. So this is much more misunderstanding, miscommunication between the United States and Turkey, which goes till up today. Today, when Turkey say we need buffer zone, safe zone, again, legally, by the way, it's Assad regime signed Adana agreement with Turkey in 1998 that give Turkey the right to go 20 kilometers inside Syria to fight the terrorists, which is PKK. And people always forget that Assad regime always created, Assad funded the PKK, Öcalan, and they give them all the support from 80s till now. So today, we back to your question. So today, when the PKK leadership, they go back to Damascus for negotiating, Damascus, I think they will give them soft hand to accept what they want. But basically, the target of Damascus dealing with the Kurds is, again, to empower them in the future to attack Turkey. So I back to the American kind of perspective that we have to absorb the Turks to be in good terms with the Turkey. PKK elements are well known for everybody. They can ask, Turkish can ask the American, these elements, hundreds of them, they are well known by names, they have to leave. The Turkish society, they are not PKK in Kamishli, in Kobani and other areas. There's so many Kurdish Syrian or Kurdish that they have nothing to do with PKK. PKK is literally have a state in Syria. We like it, we don't like it, they have the state in northeast Syria. And it's not in favor, not for the Kurds, not for the Syrian, not for the neighbors. So Turkey should defend itself, but it should do it very wisely.
Right.
Because a lot of equation play in that. Many people, they won't destroy Turkey. This is fact. Many people, they are countries, they are anti-Turkey. And they are using the Kurds for their own purpose. That's why the Turkey, from one hand, they have the full right to defend itself. At the second hand, it should be very wise to avoid all the problems, mistakes they did in Afrin. So this is the balance in between.
Kevork, is that a fair analysis that Assad would use the YPG and empower them to have designs on Turkey?
Well, there are different analyses. I respectfully disagree with your previous guest. I believe the behavior in Damascus, among the corridors in Damascus, is that they want the Kurdish, nobody wants strong Kurdish militias in Syria, whether the Syrian government or the allies of Syria. They want the Kurds to join the Syrian army, to join them to the Syrian government, and that the borders should be controlled by the Syrian official authorities. So here comes the question, why Turkey is not cooperating with the Syrian and the Russian side to eliminate this threat by allowing the Syrian government and the official forces to control the border checkpoints. If the threat is the Kurds, if we see from the Turkish perspective, then Turkey has an easy way for it to pull or to give hands to the Syrian government again, as it used to do before 2011, and to share this security threat on the borders by allowing the Syrian government to control these checkpoints and eliminate the Kurdish threat.
And perhaps a short answer could be that a lot has happened over the past 8 years, including the killings of hundreds of thousands of people. So there's a lot of mistrust, right? Murat, I want to bring you in here for a final point here. Well, I can't answer that question fully, but it is an interesting question. It's a good question. It's a hypothetical question, and let's delve into it a little bit later on another show. Murat, final word from you. For those who believe they see Turkey with Operation Olive Branch in Afrin, Jarablus, moving on with designs on Manbij. For those who believe that Turkey wants to move into northern Syria and stay and put roots into the ground, your response is what?
Well, what has been achieved where Turkey has secured by means of Turkish Armed Forces and Free Syrian Army is restructuring of these regions by means of welfare, prosperity, and also participation of the local entities to the governance of the regions. We see that after the military operations, Turkey has built a kind of self-sustaining system in these regions based on the will of the local entities. And Turkey will do the same thing. Military operation is just one phase. But after this phase, after military operations, Turkey will continue to employ the similar tactics, which is to, restructure the east of the Euphrates have the locals govern themselves and also restructure them by means of civilian help. And another issue for the comment of the guest, Turkey cannot build a bridge with Assad regime in doing this business because Assad regime is illegitimate currently, especially at the north of Syria, because of the killings of hundreds of thousands of people, which means after the democratic process that is foreseen by the Sochi and Geneva process, then Turkey will deal with the chosen, elected government of Syria, and later then, maybe we can contact with the legitimate Syrian government.
Murat, Bassam and Kevork, and earlier Peter as well. Gentlemen, we're out of time. If you didn't have enough of an opportunity, in your opinion, to have a word, the fault is all my own. I apologize, but it's been a healthy and important discussion. Hope to have you all back on the program again. Just a reminder, it's 2019. This war still rages, and it's a shame on the whole world that it still does. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us here on the Newsmakers.